And we're on.
Hey, what's up, buddy?
Hey, mate, you okay?
I'm doing good, man. How you been?
Sue? Yeah, very good. Where are you now? Are you back at the office? Or are you still at your work?
Yeah, I'm in the office. Yeah, we've been
Nice.
able. I mean, it's pretty much isolation in here because nobody's in here,
Yeah,
but we're back at least in the office, and hopefully we'll get back here pretty soon, within a month or so.
yeah, okay. How's things with you and the family? There's obviously bigger things going on over there, but we'll stay away from the politics and the social stuff that's going on.
I'll tell you, I'm ready for 2020 to be over
Yeah,
already. You know,
yes,
uh,
yeah,
yeah, it's family's great. Yeah, thanks for asking.
good.
We got, my wife and my kids are out here now, which are great.
Yeah,
We have two houses. We're still trying to sell a second house here, so that'll be with all this going on.
yeah,
So hopefully we can get that sold soon. But other than that, it's been good. Yeah, I tell you, it's tough because normally this is right now we're starting to get back into the busy time of year, but for the last 2 months, this would have been normally a time to kind of re-energize and
yeah,
kind of recoup. But between all the Zoom calls and trying to track down 100 guys every day and make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing
yeah.
and all that, it became a real busy time of year, you know.
Have they been doing what they're supposed to do?
Yeah, they don't really have a choice to
Good,
not.
good, good.
No,
But
good. Yeah, they're doing good.
excellent. I always forget this, but if anyone's got any questions, just to pop it in the comments and we can get to it. But the reason I want to chat to you, Ron, is I've been using these Instagram lives as a bit of a way to mix things up versus what goes on the podcast. Podcast being X's and O's, training theory, what people are doing in the weight room, what people are doing in their facility, whatever that may be. But taking a little change of tack with Instagram lives and just things that run parallel to our industry and are talked about maybe in other industries, leadership, entrepreneurship, etc., etc. And people do talk about them in our industry, but maybe don't. It's not communicated enough, in my opinion. And I think people often look elsewhere into other industries to get inspiration or just gain knowledge. So I
Sure.
wanted to bring that into our context and speak to people who were actually doing these kind of things in our industry to give context to people, really. And one thing I want to chat to you about, because it's always something when people bring up entrepreneurship in strength and conditioning, if someone said that, you'd be someone that would come to mind. So it'd be good to, yeah, it's great to get you on and have a little chat about that. But if you, I can kind of regurgitate my little spiel of where I see that in myself and where that actually came from, that kind of entrepreneurial spirit. But was there somewhere like a parents or someone that you can relate to where you kind of got that from, or is it just something innate within you that drives you to have that entrepreneurial spirit, which I know you have?
Yeah, it's funny you say it that way.
Yeah.
I'm writing my third book on this very topic right now, actually,
Nice.
um, and so I've had to do a little bit of soul searching on it. And really, honestly, it traces back to my final, going into my final year at the University of South Florida. The head coach had got fired for something that didn't happen, and he got blamed. They said that he hit a player and he didn't. He just kind of straightened the kid's chin up like he would talk to like somebody,
Okay.
um, and yeah, I mean, he was still let go. And here I was. I'd been strength coach of the year. We'd gone to 6 straight bowl games or 5 straight bowl games at that time. Put 10 years or 9 years of my heart and soul into a place, and yet just because somebody at the top had been changed, I could potentially get fired as well. And even though I got retained and, it set me down the path of me not liking somebody else having control of my destiny. And that's really what it boils down to. But up until that point, I was quite the opposite. I was, safety and security and, a good job and things like that. I mean, in my family, that was big. We didn't. I grew up pretty rough, and just to have a job that was respectable, and you got a paycheck every week and all that. That was big. Now it's quite the opposite. Now, like if I don't have a little bit of chaos in my life, I don't feel normal. And And I think it's almost riskier to just have one source of income or one stream of income. If you don't have multiple streams, especially times like this, if this pandemic hasn't taught anything else, it should teach you that, hey, like anything can be taken at any time. And if you're not, I understand, especially in some of the profiles of jobs that I've been in where like I can't get on even now, like even now I can't get on and be, pushing some product every other day. People be like, well, are you coaching or are you selling your own stuff? Right. But if you're not doing that, then you definitely should be developing skill sets that can be leveraged in a different way, because most people's plan B is to open up a gym or, or something. And they don't realize that if you get into that bit, like it's a business, like if you don't understand that business, you're going to fail miserably. And you got to become just as much of a businessman as you are a coach. And so, there's a book called The Startup of You, I think, by Reid Hoffman and like Ben something or another. It's the guy that invented LinkedIn. And, they say in that you have to have a plan A, which is what your iteration of what your competitive advantage is. So, for me, that's coaching, right? That's my plan A. But plan B, you need to have something that kind of runs in tandem with that. And, basically, that you could pick up if you had to pivot for any reason. And then plan Z, as in zebra, is like, what happens if the bottom falls out and there's a worldwide pandemic and you have, what are you going to do to where you're going to make money for your family or whatever? And you got to kind of have all three of those things working at all times. If you're going to be in this volatile profession, like you have to have a couple other options. And if you don't have any other skill sets, that's really when all of a sudden you get out of the profession and you start roofing houses or something. You're not able to leverage your experience and all this investment that you've made to continue to keep growing forward. And that's what I've tried to do in my career is, I've leveraged my experience in pro and college athletics and gotten, special forces experience, or I've went and worked as a vice president in a company with play, or I've created products, or I've written books, or I've started podcasts or whatever. All those things have made it so that I know without a shadow of a doubt that I could always make money if I had to.
Wasn't that? Go on, mate. Sorry, carry on.
And I do. I mean, those things do generate some money for me, and create some other revenue streams. But I think so many times that people think that as coaches we're trying, like you're unhappy. I love what I do. Like that revenue stream. I don't, I'm trying to get to the opposite, where I'm trying to get to a point where I coach for free and have all these other things support that. That way, like nobody has control over my passion.
That's really interesting, because I got a bit of advice probably maybe 6 or 7 years ago, and it was coach because you want to, not because you have to. Yep. And that really resonated with me. And that kind of backs that up. But just going back onto your move to play, was that a calculated move in terms of what you wanted to get out of it? Maybe test yourself in a different environment, build skills that you didn't have or wanted to harness? Was that a calculated move?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was calculated in that I actively sought it out. It was calculated in that I put myself in a position to where I was willing to listen to anything and everything. And I think that that's part of it, right? Is there's never going to be in your career, especially as a coach, where there's a clear answer as to go to this team or that team is right or wrong, right? What you have to do is you have to kind of mitigate the risk, and you have to say, like, okay, what's the worst that can happen in these situations? So in that situation with play, one, it was a great company with great people that I really enjoyed being around, and I developed a relationship with them having been a sponsor of my podcast, and I aligned with their vision. And it was also a time in my life when I was literally living apart from my family so that I could coach. And I have four adopted children that were all going into high school. So like I had to make a choice. Like, is this what I want to do? Live apart from my family and miss the next 4 years, which is the last 4 years that they're probably going to be in the house. Mm-hmm. Or if I stepped away for a little bit and did this, what's the worst that could happen? The worst that could happen is I could go right back into coaching, and yet the best thing that could happen is I could learn all these other skill sets and who knows. And so I really enjoyed my time and love the company with everything. And I'm still a part of it in some ways, but if you're a coach and you're a good coach, it's in your DNA and that's who you are. And I had to get back to what I love, what I love to do, and coaching 12 hours a day. I mean, it's what I love to do, but I also love the entrepreneurial stuff. And so there's a good, I've written about this in my book, having meaningful distractions, mm-hmm. And making sure that you have things in your life that are ways for you to express yourself creatively that are outside of your current kind of 9 to 5. And these entrepreneurial ventures, be it a podcast or writing a book or, whatever, those are meaningful distractions to me. They're ways for me to kind of be creative. And what's been good that I didn't anticipate on the front end has been that I've been able to create some revenue streams around them that have helped, support, the family as well. So it's a win-win.
Did you, when you got into the podcast, did you ever think that there could be a revenue stream there?
I had no idea. Yeah,
no,
I had no idea.
No.
Didn't even when I first started that, I didn't even know it was going to be a podcast. I just put it up as a YouTube video.
Yeah.
And Mike Boyle actually told me to make it a podcast, and I said, yes, sir. What's a podcast?
Yeah. Yeah. When did you start that, Ron? When did you start the podcast?
7 years. I did it for 7 years. I kind of stopped it this last year, so probably 2013, I guess.
Wow.
And did it when I got let go from Tennessee, which the head coach got fired, so we all got fired, and I was traveling around and was talking to coaches, going do what every coach does, right? And it got expensive, and I started Skyping people. And I was like, well, shoot, I might as well just record this and put it up on my website, and so that's what I did. And I think the big thing, the lesson to take away, from all of this, what I tell people is, one is if everybody's going right, you ought to go left. I think too many people just kind of, just kind of go with the herd mentality. And I think that's, there's nothing. It's the blue ocean. If you ever read Blue Ocean, that's a good analogy in the book, where if all the sharks are in the same area feeding off the same fish, there's a whole big blue ocean out there that has a bunch of other fish in it, right?
Yeah.
And so there's an opportunity there. The other thing is to take intelligent risk. Like, you got to make sure that you're taking risk in your career. And I mean, this life's too short. Like, you shouldn't, I don't know what the story or the quote is, but it goes something to the effect of, like, you shouldn't show up to the pearly gates in this pristine kind of perfect self. You should come in freaking beat up and skid it up and, use every ounce of your life to kind of, to experience as much of it as you possibly can. And I don't think you can do that if you constantly stay in comfort,
Yeah.
So putting myself out there, like, there was no shortage of people that when I first started a podcast that were like making fun of me, or when I first said I was going to write a book, made fun of me, but yet then all of a sudden the podcast becomes a top 100 in iTunes, and the book becomes a #1 international bestseller. And, all those things, all those same people now are like, coming back going, how do I do that?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I've just made it a point my whole career, whether or not it's strength and conditioning related or entrepreneurial related, to not always go, if everybody's going right, go left.
Yeah. I think I've said this quite a few times. I think there is a fear of strength coaches, maybe because I suppose the emotional attachment, maybe the financial attachment that they've got to stay in a very thin lane and have a very traditional viewpoint of their progression. So just using over here, for an example, a job in an academy, an assistant in an academy, then it goes head of academy, then it goes assistant first team, then it goes first team, then it goes, just that linear progression. And I think people struggle to see the enormous opportunities that are left and right of them because they're on this sole path of the traditional progression. And I think it's those that go, I wonder what is over there. That looks quite interesting. Or
Right.
I've had a little look, but I'll just come back into my lane again. But I'll have a little look to the right next time. It's that I think it's them people that are, to me, the really interesting ones, and end up 5 years down the line, people end up going, he's doing something cool. How did that ever happen?
Right.
And it's because they've opened the mind and gone, I'll have a little wander over there and see what, like you with the play stuff. I wonder if there's something there that you start chatting, they start chatting. There's actually something that is some sort of collaboration. It leads to X, Y, and Z. But I think there's a lot of people who that's scary, and that's fine. Like, I think it is scary, but like you say, what is the worst that can happen? You just get another job.
Well, I think that's what the fear is that it's such a competitive profession that you feel like if you made a misstep, a miscalculation, that it's unovercomable, or it's either that, which again, you got to mitigate the risk and say, oh, what's the worst that could happen? Okay, well, I learned how to, if I'm making 60,000, I'll learn how to make 60,000 another way. Like I would, whenever I came to those things, I would say I could literally go, there's people out there literally making money selling sweaters for cats on the internet right now. It's like you can find a way to make money in this world at this point, and even if I had to go work on a trash truck every day, I could make probably what a lot of strength coaches make if I had to do that, and then take that off time and kind of make some of these other things happen if I needed to. But there's the fear of losing because of the competitive landscape, and then there's the fear of, like, what are my peers going to say about this?
100%.
And what I found is like I rarely get introduced anymore as just a strength coach. Usually I get introduced as like a best-selling author, or that I've got this top-rated podcast, or that I've, won, this award or whatever, because there's been attention brought to my, to what I've done or whatever. But I'm rarely, people actually rally around that, and most of them are asking the same questions because, being the soccer coach, the head soccer coach, that comes with all the same volatility that a strength coach comes with. So they're sitting there going like, what happens if I get fired? What am I going to do? And how can I leverage my individual brand and those types of things. And so when you start to show pathways that other people can be like, oh man, that's pretty cool. Like, that's interesting. You can do that. What you have to do to get past that, in my mind, is you have to figure out what your platform is and how your platform relates to what you currently do. So like my platform is all about education. That fits very nicely in coaching, because nobody's ever really going to come to me and say, don't educate other coaches. That's kind of socially accepted. If my platform was make money selling workouts to younger athletes, there may be a conflict there that kind of exists. And that might be recruiting issues, or just credibility issues or whatever. And so you have to make sure that you kind of build your platform around it, something that's complementary to what you do. So that way, if you had to justify it, you could justify it with no fear of conflict. And if you do that, then people usually rally around you. And I think you got to be really clear. Like, I'm really clear about, 9 times out of 10, I'm shooting a podcast while I'm not at work. Just because that way I can always say that, hey, look, I'm at work 70 hours a week. So yeah, was that my lunch hour, or was that, but I try to do it on weekends or in the evenings. So that way, hey, I did all that at home. What I didn't do is I didn't watch TV for 4 hours. I shot a podcast. you know. But at the end of the day, you got to get to a point where you just don't care what other people think.
Yeah.
You got to know in your heart what your motivations are. Like I started Iron Game Chalk Talk, never intending for that to make any money. It was purely just to give back, to try to, share some of these conversations that I had access to that other people didn't.
Mm-hmm.
When I wrote the book, I literally, if you ask my wife, she would tell you that I thought one person would buy that book. I thought my mom would buy that book. No, I thought my mom would buy it, and that was it.
Yeah.
I thought my wife was maybe 50-50. Maybe she would buy it or not. But it ends up going and doing really, really well. And at the end of the day, if those things failed and I sold one copy of the book and two people listened to my podcast, that's okay. I did it for me, not for them necessarily. Now I've gotten to a point where I've seen the impact that it can make, and I do feel almost obligated to try to find ways to, at this point now, exactly what we're talking about is what my motivation is. My motivation is to figure out how to help support coaches to find multiple streams of income and build a brand around their, build a business around their individual brand, and most coaches don't know what an individual brand is. Most coaches don't know how to build a business at all, but you can build these complementary services, speaking, camps, clinics, all these things that are complementary to what you do. And if you had those things going on, if all of a sudden coaching gets taken away from me, which is the thing that I absolutely hate about this profession, is that can be taken away from me.
Yeah.
I can pick these other things up, instead of running one clinic, maybe I run 5 clinics, instead of writing one book, maybe I write 2 books, if I have the extra time, but if you're trying to figure it out, just like being a head strength coach, if you're trying to figure out how to be a head strength coach in the first week of being a head strength coach, you're in trouble.
Yeah. Have you ever had any problems with employers with the stuff that you do on the side, whether it's writing a book or doing the podcast, or no? Good.
No, yeah, I mean, I thought I would, I thought I have. There is some with NCAA, you have to disclose, some of your outside income and things like that, but as long as you're honest, what I've found is at this point in my career, it's part of the leveraging. It's part of the negotiation. I'm not taking this job unless you allow me to do some of these other things, but by you allowing me to do these other things, then you get to leverage my social media.
100%.
You get to leverage, your institution benefits from me being there. And, and I think it sounds really, really selfish, and I absolutely don't want it to come across that way, but it used to be like Ron McKeefery, head strength, it was like head strength coach at the University of South Florida, Ron McKeefery, instead of it being Ron McKeefery, head strength coach at the University of South Florida. And I think that's a mental shift that you got to get to, because if you commoditize yourself and you make it so that anybody can do your job, then you can't have it both ways. Then when they do make a change, you're the one that put them in the position where that. But if you make it so that you're valuable, and the grass is always greener, right? You're always a bigger strength coach outside of your zip code, So like, if those coaches that you work with, they're always kind of seeing, well, what about this guy that's speaking here, and what about that coach that's speaking there, and this coach is doing this, they're an advisor for this company and whatever. Well, if you're not doing those things to kind of position yourself as an authority, somebody else is, then don't be surprised when they're like, hey, what about this person?
Yeah.
And, what I found is that it's helped you do that, right? It's helped you build authority. And I mean, there's been 2 stops where I've walked in and they, even though I've gotten pretty much every award you can get as a strength coach and coached at every level, and I can hang my hat on any one of my jobs, I've built the most credibility and immediately with my athletes at 2 stops because of my Twitter following or my Instagram following. They're like, he's got over 10,000. He must be a good coach.
He's in. We like him already.
Yeah, you know, and it's stupid, but it's the truth, especially with that age group of athletes sometimes. So, you know, play the game.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think, you know, I mean, Brett Bartholomew is a great friend of mine. I know you know him as well.
Yeah.
Him and I always talk about kind of the profession, the state of the union of the profession. And, you know, here's what I know. And this is not popular opinion, and probably people will, you know, will disagree with this. But the profession isn't going to change in my time. You know, it might get a little bit better, but in terms of like getting the you know, the security or getting the pay or getting, it's probably never going to, it's not going to, in my time, in the next 10 years before I retire being a strength coach, it's probably not going to change. So I can sit back and I can bitch and complain about it, you know, and, you know, throw my hands up and get frustrated and let it consume me. Or I can just know how to play the game, and then I create these other things, and I just don't let that be, you know, if I feel like in my mind, again, hopefully this is in my mind, like I should be making $1 million. Like, why does a football coach make $1 million and I don't, when I'm dealing with the same number of athletes, I'm dealing with the same, you know, like, why is, you know, like, I'm just as intelligent as football coaches out there, whatever, right? Now, the market dictates that a college football coach or a pro football coach is worth $1 million or multiple $1 million. But in strength and conditioning, the market hasn't dictated that the strength coach is worth that much yet. So I can go beat my head against the wall and be like complaining that the market doesn't, you know, doesn't agree with me, you know, or I can go out there and figure out ways to get myself to $1 million, you know?
Yeah.
And that's my goal. My goal is to, how do I get to become a millionaire as a strength coach, you know, by surrounding myself with all these other things that are complementary that don't take away from what I love to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was always one thing that came up when I used to speak to people or put on Twitter about second incomes, was the fact that people arguing that it would take the emphasis or the edge off what you're doing 9 to 5, or so to speak, 9 to 5. Well, no, it's not 9 to 5, but during the day it would take away from that. But I think it's such a important point that it's always complementary. And you doing this extra stuff, whether it's a podcast, that's adding value to you as a person, and therefore as an employee. You speak to Brett Bartholomew for a podcast for an hour and a half. That's CPD for you for an hour and a half. You're bringing that back to the institution, to the organization where you work. Right. You're communicating the messages. They're getting an hour and a half free CPD because you've taken the time to set this thing up on the side. Whether it's making money or not, that doesn't make any difference to what's going on, you know, what the information that you're bringing back to the organization. So to me, it's such an important thing to have them things on the side, and it doesn't take away, it adds to what you bring to the organization. Like you say, when you're moving jobs or looking for another job, that's leverage. All that stuff's leverage. Like Brett's in, like just using Brett's in the area. Who does he come and visit? He comes and visits you guys for 3 hours or half a day or whatever. It's on your connection and the work that you've put in behind the scenes.
Hey, hold on 1 second, guys. I'm on a meeting. Sorry, got a couple players in.
That's fine. No.
Yeah, 100%. I think it is. I think it is a hard sell because most times people don't understand the value that brings. But like the value of the network that I have by being able to pick up the phone call and literally be probably 1 degree of separation away from anybody, you know, on the world at this point, you know, because of a podcast or because of the things that makes it, you know, very valuable to Fresno State University, right? But if they don't have an entrepreneurial spirit like that, it's hard for them to value that. But what isn't hard to understand is the process of creating systems and batching time and things like that. And so, you know, like right now, for example, I'm creating the new podcast that's complementary to the new book, right? And
Okay.
I'm working on both of those things right now. So here's literally what I do. Every morning, I do an 30 minutes of research on, whatever topic, that I was, so like this afternoon, I'm going to write about the 4 cash flow quadrants as a part of this section of this book. And so this morning I read some research that I had printed off over the weekend that I piled up, and I've read, 30 minutes before I started my workday at my desk. But I read for 30 minutes. Tonight, I'm going to write 300 words on that very topic. So that's going to take me, because I'm not a writer typically, that's going to take me probably 40 minutes. So instead of watching a 40-minute TV show, I'm going to write for 40 minutes tonight. Podcast, I'm banking a bunch of different podcasts right now to launch later on with this. And so this weekend, I'm going to shoot 2 podcasts at 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. on Saturday morning before my kids and my wife wake up. So those 2 things right there, probably, and again, I don't know, and I don't want to, I don't know, I want to be transparent, but those 2 things, if I get that book done and I get that podcast going, that's probably going to generate $40,000+ for me a year, later on. And I literally put 2 hours on the weekend and an hour and a half in each day before and after work. So so people can understand that, right? They can understand that that's like, and I just chose to do something different with my time outside of here. So, they may not understand the value that you're bringing to the school. I get that. And not everybody will, but they can understand that, like, your free time is your free time, and how you use it is how you use it. Now, granted, I know that we're shooting this in the middle of the day, but it's a little bit at a different time. And I've been at work since 5 a.m. this morning. Normally I probably wouldn't shoot this in the middle of the day, but because you're overseas and all that, I wanted to do it. But I try to avoid things like this, during work hours, because I don't want the perception to be,
Of course,
that that I'm not focused 100% on my current job.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, challenge me on it. Like, I feel like I can defend anything at any time.
What's just run us through the new book, Ron, and what the podcast is how the podcast is gonna complement it.
Yeah, so the book is called Overtime, and it's exactly this. It's all about working overtime, outside of the normal working hours, to first create a brand and build authority, and then create a revenue stream around that brand.
Good work.
The podcast is all interviewing coaches that have created some of these side hustles, that have been complementary to what they're doing, telling their story. So part of it's research, right? Because I'm using some of that as case studies in the book.
Yeah.
And then it's also going to be launching it with, whatever. And, and then you start to look, and, in the book, I write about the different ways you can monetize a podcast, the different ways you can monetize and write a book, and things like that. And so now they kind of feed off one another, right? The book said, the podcast, I talk about the book every podcast. So maybe somebody buys the book. If I do the book, maybe somebody watches the podcast, and I'm able to leverage that for advertising dollars or sponsorship dollars or whatever, and all the while making it so my end user, the person that I'm trying to serve, it is coming out very minimally, to be a part of my tribe, and that's ultimately what I'm trying to do.
That's really interesting. I'm excited to read it. So when's it supposed to be published?
So I've got the first draft done. I'm working on the second draft right now, and I've self-published both my books. I'll probably self-publish this one as well.
Yeah.
I haven't decided yet complete, because I kind of want this one to break besides just strength coaches. I kind of want it to be all coaches. But that's the plan right now. I'm hoping to have it by September.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading it, and I think that is so needed. Hence this. These are all the things that I talked about elsewhere, but just not given the context. And I always think about is it John Lyde, the Excel Tricks for Sports guy on YouTube? And there's quite a few more of that type now. But if you go on YouTube, there's tons of stuff out there on Excel. But
yeah, so like he's
it's hard to put context because it's not a workout sheet or it's not in our language. But as soon as you put it in our language, oh wow, look at all these things you can do in Excel. Well, you could do that anyway, but it just wasn't translated into what we understand and what we enjoy and how we communicate and take in information. And that's exactly what it sounds like you're going to do, which is superb.
What's great about that, it's great. It's a good example. Like, I don't know him and I don't know, maybe he's doing this and maybe he's making a killing, but like the reality is that most coaches are doing that kind of stuff without having any kind of thought to how they can leverage that for an additional revenue stream, right? So like with YouTube, if you have 1,000 subscribers and you have 4,000 hours of watch time, then for every 1,000 views, you can get $1 to $3, right? So like all those people that are watching his videos, if he set it up in a way, he could be getting $3 at some point for every 1,000 views. And that adds up, maybe it pays your cable bill. Maybe it pays, your kid's car payment or something,
Yeah.
But if you can start to kind of have money not going out, the better. And that's the whole point is, we oftentimes we sit back and we complain about all these people out there, these gurus out there making, money off of, the victims of whatever. In lieu of the actual professionals doing it, then the people will listen to those gurus and those people that aren't as credible. The people that should be doing it are the ones that are listening to this probably that are saying, hey, look, I'm educated. I've got the knowledge. I've got the authority. How do I create these streams around me in a way that is non-invasive to my day? So like he's doing those videos anyways. Now, if he just took the time to learn how to monetize his YouTube channel, that would be a revenue stream for him. If he hasn't already done that. So
yeah.
These guys are sitting outside my office. I'm probably have to get
Oh no, that's fine. Do you want to shoot off?
Yeah, if I can jump off of this at this point, I apologize. I wish I had
no. Don't you worry about that. Thank you for giving me time. Appreciate it's middle of the day, but I'll speak to you soon. Thanks.
Yeah, awesome, man. Thanks, man. Appreciate you.
Pleasure. See you, mate.
See ya.